This is the DJI Inspire 2. It's the drone we all really want. The body alone, the frame will cost you about $3,000, and then if you want to add a decent camera to it, you can expect to spend a couple more grand. But let's go over all the details, and let's talk about why it's worth that money, because I really think it is. First, this is the body, and as you can see from the form factor, it looks quite a bit different from the DJI Mavic at the entry level or the DJI Phantom series. Frankly, it looks way cooler. It has a couple of key differences physically. One of them is that you can attach separate cameras. The base model camera is $600, the Zenmuse X4S. And this is basically a fixed lens 24mm camera with a physical f2.8 aperture on it. So it's equivalent in 35mm terms to a 24mm f7.6 lens. It has 11.6 stops of dynamic range, 20 megapixels, and it will shoot 4K at 60 frames a second. It's a great little camera, but it has the same limitation that every other drone camera has, basically, which is that it's a fixed wide-angle lens, which is good. It's versatile for overall kind of sweeping drone shots, but especially for those of us trying to do still photography or serious cinematography, sometimes you just want to zoom in a little bit, right? And if that sounds like you, you can pony up for the better camera. If you buy the Inspire 2 and this Zenmuse X4S together, it'll cost you about $3,600. But if you're going for the big Inspire, you better get the good camera too, which is the Zenmuse X5S. Without a lens, it goes for $1,400. It's a micro four thirds mount, so you can mount not any micro four thirds lens, but a variety of approved lenses. And they have focal lengths ranging from super wide angle to an equivalent 90mm lens. So you could actually take portraits with it and get great background blur, which is something really new for a drone. Well, you can do it with the original Inspire 2, but it's something you can't do with this class of drone. Together with a lens, this is going to cost you about $5,000, but chances are good you'll probably get a couple of extra lenses. These micro four thirds lenses are available used and really inexpensive, so that can save you a few bucks. But honestly, you're probably not pinching any pennies at this price point. I'll also add that this is a professional grade drone, and if you're laying down $5,000, well, you'd better count on laying down $10,000, because if you're preparing a whole production around this expensive drone, you really have to be planning for failure, some kind of redundancy. So just like any good wedding photographer would they might drop $6,000 on a camera and lens, they have to really get two of them, because they have to plan for failure. And they have to be prepared when something does die. And I think the chances of a drone failing are a lot higher than the chances of a professional grade camera failing, because you might accidentally crash into something. User error with a camera generally doesn't result in total destruction and physical failure or total loss in the ocean or something. With a drone, you can screw up and lose the whole thing. So plan on buying two of them. Let's talk about why an interchangeable lens is so important on a drone. It's one of the things that has frustrated me about drone photography up to this point is these fixed wide angle lenses. It's like shooting everything with your smartphone. Sometimes you want to zoom in. Here's a shot I got of the Ledge Lighthouse in New London. Yes, everybody calls it the Casey Neistat Lighthouse because he went out there once. As you can see, this is the sun setting behind it, and the sun back there is a tiny little point in the sky. This is the same subject size with a telephoto lens on a real camera, and that's the moon behind it. And you can see with a big telephoto lens, I can control the relationship between the background and a foreground subject. And that's something you can't do by just changing your subject distance. So a drone can fly super close to a subject and fill the frame with it with any focal length. That's great. But you can't control the background relationship. It's always going to shrink things in the background to be really small. That's why you need telephoto lenses. It's super important. I wish DJI would give us a lower end drone with a nice zoom on it or interchangeable lenses. Right now you have to pony up for either the Inspire 1 or the new Inspire 2. Getting that high end camera, which is what you should get, actually, I think it's a 20 megapixel sensor. It has 12.8 stops of dynamic range. It'll shoot a full 20 frames per second, and it will shoot 4K at 60 frames a second. It'll actually do one step above that. It'll do 5.2K at a whopping 4.2 gigabits per second. So it'll produce massive raw video files that are capable of being pushed hard in editing. It's not going to keep up with your RED cameras, but you can definitely mix it in there. And I think DJI's demonstrations show that you can get great quality out of it at a comparatively low price point, because your alternative is to get one of their even bigger drones and mount one of your RED cameras to that. And that will cost you solidly into the 5 figures. So it's actually pretty cheap. They've geared this up to output broadcast quality live video. You can hook up an HDMI output to the controller and stream that live at 1080i 50 or 720p 60. So just about whatever broadcast standard you might be using, including high speed HD. So you can imagine if you're covering a sports event, you could, at a pretty low cost, have nice overhead drone shots of the action. Now, you're going to be landing every 20 or 30 minutes to swap the batteries out, but you could get a couple of them and rotate them, or just plan to land and swap it out in between, during timeouts or something. Anyway, to be able to get an overhead view at this price point of a live broadcast is pretty amazing. You can stream live to Facebook or something else with these smaller drones, but it's not quite the same quality. It's not broadcast quality. One of the big differences at the Inspire level is the retracting legs. And let me tell you why that's important, because both the Mavic and even more so the Phantom will get the props in a lot of shots, especially if you're flying into the wind at some speed. They lean forward so far that you'll see the props entering the top of the frame. And I can't tell you how many otherwise great shots I've had ruined because of those props. The Mavic, the design is a little bit better, and the camera's farther forward and the props are a little bit farther out, so it doesn't suffer from it as often, but I still have a lot of shots with the Mavic props in them. Now, the Inspire props will get in there occasionally, but because they're further up and further away from the camera, it's less frequent. I've asked DJI to maybe make a software update that would monitor the tilt of the camera and the tilt of the frame, and when you're recording, actually allow you to have the option to prevent that much tilt. So maybe it would be forced to slow down a little bit, but it would keep the props out of the frame. Or if it could at least notify you when the props are in the frame, because you can't always see it until you get back and you start looking at your footage, and then you realize a shot was not a keeper. The Inspire 2 has better obstacle avoidance. The forward-looking camera can see much farther than these other drones can. So it can just better track forward obstacles. But really importantly, it has upward-facing obstacle avoidance, and especially with the Phantom 4 Pro, which can see basically in 360 degrees all around, and it can see downward, it can't see upward, which is frequently where I crash into things, because if you come up, you might be hitting a tree or something else. If you're operating in an interior, trying to take real estate videos, for example, it's easy to crash into a ceiling. Also, this happened with the Mavic just the other day. I was just flying it, and even though I was like 10, 15 feet away, it lost connection with my controller and then went into fly home mode, at which point it just ascends to like 90 feet. So it just automatically started ascending, and it can't see if it's underneath a tree. It almost crashed into the lip of my roof. It just barely missed it. So all these drones should have upward-looking cameras for obstacle avoidance. They don't. The DJI Inspire does. It's one of those nice things that you get. It also has a built-in first-person view camera fixed at the front of the drone itself. So it actually has 2 cameras when you mount that higher quality second camera onto it. This provides you a constant view looking forward, and this is really important because with these higher quality productions, you'll often be working as a 2-person team. One person operating the freely rotating camera on the bottom, the cameraman. They can even use focus pulling mechanism to make sure that focus is nice and sharp. The second person will actually be flying the drone, and they need, of course, to be able to see forward. We've definitely run into challenges where you're trying to fly sideways with a Phantom, and when you fly sideways with a Phantom, well, the camera always faces forward, so the Phantom itself has to be facing sideways. Especially with the older Phantoms, that means you don't have any obstacle avoidance on the sides, and even this new Phantom 4 has very mediocre obstacle avoidance on the sides. It really doesn't have enough range to be able to stop in time, which means you could just accidentally crash into something when flying sideways, because you don't always have the perspective that you need to avoid it. Even if you have eye contact with the drone, you might not be able to properly have enough depth perception to know that you won't crash into something. Anyway, these types of crashes do happen. This can prevent those crashes. So in a way, you're spending more money, but you could end up saving yourself some money by not crashing the drone. It also means the pilot could put on some FPV glasses and just worry about flying, see everything in first-person perspective, while the producer and the cameraman are working a totally separate operation with a rotating camera. It actually has two types of storage: a very fast SSD that can pull in those massive 5.2K video files, and a separate micro SD card, which can be configured to store video redundantly. So you have two separate options here, and if one of them fails, you could have a backup. Obviously, the micro SD card can't store video at the same higher footage, but it's nice to have that second option. It's the DJI, they call it the DJI Cine SSD. The maximum speed is a very, very fast 67 miles per hour, and they always measure the speed with basically no wind. So the maximum speed of the Phantoms is about 45 miles an hour, but I think my top speed is more like 56 miles an hour. If you're going downwind, you can definitely get some extra speed. So it could be faster or it could be less fast, but this is important because, as you can see, sometimes you need to be able to keep up with moving subjects when you're filming. How nice. The service ceiling is listed at 16,400 feet. Of course, you wouldn't be able to fly that far. And in fact, in the last week, several airline pilots have reported close calls with drones flying very high, so it's kind of useless. You're allowed to fly at 400 feet or below unless you have a drone certification in the US and you get special permission. That service ceiling is with a special set of props that allow it to fly higher. Oddly, the Phantom series will fly up even higher to like 19,000 feet with the standard props, but they don't weigh as much, so they're probably a little bit more efficient. As I mentioned, the Inspire 2 supports dual controllers, one for the camera operator, one for the drone pilot. The maximum range is extended some to 4.3 miles or about 7 kilometers. Now, again, with FAA rules, you need to keep eye contact with the drone and you can't see that far, but these numbers, you never quite get them in the real world, and sometimes there'll be some tree leaves or some sort of interference, so it is good to have a more powerful signal just in case, just so that connection can be a little bit more reliable. These controllers, as I mentioned, have HDMI out, either for patching into a headset or for connecting into broadcast equipment. You can get HDMI out with your Phantom, you just have to install an extra little gadget in the controller. The battery system is a dual battery, self-heating battery. So if you're flying up at really high altitudes and it gets cold, or you're just flying in the winter, that would severely impact your battery life. It will heat itself up and make that a little bit more reliable. Also, there's some redundancy there. If one of the batteries fails, well, in your Phantom or your Mavic, you sink, you just crash to the ground. If one of these batteries fails, you can still navigate, and assuming you have a little bit of juice left, you should be able to get yourself home. It's really helpful because LiPos, the batteries can just flake out. They do sometimes just flake out. It's odd that this is one of the, there's a significant lack of redundancy in the props. It still only has 4 props. And if a single prop fails, a single motor fails, it will immediately come crashing. Hexacopters are available at similar prices that do offer some redundancy. So they have 6 props, and if one of those fails, it can still balance itself well enough to at least bring it in for a safe landing. You put a lot of faith in their ability to build these little brushless motors that spin those props. But I will say, recent generations of DJI drones have been extremely reliable in my experience. The older ones most definitely flaked out all the time, but these have been pretty reliable. Just a quick plug for my photography books and my books on post-processing about Lightroom and Photoshop. If you are shooting with a drone, you really need to learn the basics of, first, camera settings, but also things like lighting, composition, and storytelling, whether you're shooting video or still. So check out my book, Stunning Digital Photography. Not just a book, but it has over 12 hours of video. You can just search for it at Amazon or visit our store here. We ship worldwide. Thank you. Let's compare the Inspire 2 to a few alternatives. First, to the predecessor, the Inspire 1, which is still available and is an even better value now. The Inspire 1 with a camera, with a basic camera, is selling for $2,000. If you want the basic camera on the Inspire 2, you're going to end up spending about $3,600. So the price has gone up significantly, but so has the feature set. If you get the Inspire 1, you can still fix an interchangeable lens camera on there. I know there are a lot of stills photographers who want to be able to basically have a floating camera that they can position anywhere, but they're not satisfied with a 24 millimeter equivalent lens. Maybe it's just me. The Inspire 1 is looking like a great option because you can stick an interchangeable lens Micro Four Thirds camera on there, have full control of it, have full visibility of it. It's starting to look like a decent option. $2,000 plus the extra for the camera is not that much compared to, say, a pro grade DSLR. The differences are the Inspire 2 is faster at 67 miles an hour, up from 50 miles an hour. The battery life is significantly longer, which should help you get those long shots where you might have to do multiple takes. It means you won't have to keep landing and going back up. The video quality is significantly better. 4K at a higher frame rate of 60 frames a second, but also higher resolution, which allows you to crop a little bit, or even if you end up rendering at 4K, you'll see noticeably sharper images if you record at 5.2K. It is a dedicated first-person view camera. With the Inspire 1, you can only see through the camera you're using to record. So if you're recording sideways and you're flying forward, the pilot doesn't have a first-person view of that at all. He's kind of flying blind. So that's going to be a really, really important upgrade. As I mentioned, dual batteries for both longer battery life and redundancy, so it could save your drone from crashing. Compared to the Phantom 4 Pro, the top-end Pro, the top-end Phantom camera, we just did a review of the Phantom 4 Pro, so check our channel if you want to see that, especially compared to the Mavic. The Inspire with a basic camera is over twice the price of the Phantom 4 Pro. The biggest differences are going to be the greater speed. It actually has less battery life than the Phantom 4 Pro, but it has redundant batteries. It has that second first-person view camera. It has upward sensors. It has full 360-degree camera rotation. With the Phantom, if you want to film sideways, you have to fly sideways, which means, again, you basically give up obstacle avoidance because the infrared obstacle avoidance on the sides on the Phantom 4 Pro covers only a really short range, and it will not be enough for you to stop from crashing into something at high speed. It has retractable legs, so you won't have shots ruined because of the props, or at least it's less likely. You can have a dual controller so a separate person can film, and you can up the video quality to 5.2K. The Phantom 4 Pro does support 4K at 60 frames a second, so they match there. The Mavic Pro obviously doesn't compare. It's a $1,000 drone that's optimized for size, but I just wanted to compare what it looks like if you're traveling, because I know this is a big factor for people. Some of you don't care about the budget at all. You'll happily drop $3,600 on a drone, but that's what you'll be walking around with, a backpack that looks like that, and a significant amount of setup time as you kind of assemble it and get the controller ready. With the Mavic, you can fly without a controller. You can fly with your smartphone using Wi-Fi. The range isn't as far, but it actually works really well. So you can really just fold this up, and it'll even fit into like the pocket of your cargo shorts if they're generous, or you can just strap them to your belt like that guy shows. The portability on that is amazing. We really like it, but check our review of the Phantom 4 Pro to see a review of that too. DJI has a monster drone that's one step above the Inspire 2, the Matrice 600 Pro. As you can see, it's a hexacopter with 6 props on it, so that offers a little bit of redundancy. It has much more sophisticated systems. It comes in at 5K. You'll notice that it doesn't even really, it just has kind of a connector. It doesn't even have a gimbal built into it or anything. Well, the Inspire 2 has that separate too. The M600 Pro is a separate battery for every prop. So there's a lot of extra redundancy there. It can fly for longer at 37 minutes. It's not quite as fast, but it can carry 13 pounds. So that means you can hook up a Ronin gimbal and a Hasselblad camera or a Red camera, or basically whatever camera you want, and get as much quality as you want. Whereas with the Inspire 2, you're basically stuck using one of the DJI cameras. So if those cameras don't suit your needs, you're not out of luck. You can use the M600 Pro. It has the ability to stream a live feed of whatever camera you hook up to it back to your controller, so you can monitor that in real time. A couple of disappointing points about the Inspire 2 that I want to cover. First, it has the same controller as the Phantoms, and that's not a controller we especially like. It's ugly and seems unnecessarily bulky, especially when you use the very compact controller of the Mavic Pro. It also completely lacks a built-in display, so you're relying on an external tablet. Nonetheless, it's functional. It's just not my favorite. It's not a big deal. Also, the price gets really expensive, especially when you include the interchangeable lens camera. What I really want is a Phantom series drone with an interchangeable lens camera, because I don't necessarily need all the features of the Inspire at that high price point, but I really do want to be able to change lenses. So maybe either give me something cheaper or put that interchangeable camera on a less expensive drone. If you have any questions, add a comment down below. We hope to be testing this soon. I have a feeling that DJI doesn't have production models shipping yet because we haven't been able to get a loaner. But subscribe to see that. One more plug for the store. And thanks so much. Give me a like, subscribe, share with your friends. Bye.